Chapter 14. "You look tired," Bubba said as he slid into the passenger seat of Makenna's cruiser. Dark red lines stood out in her bloodshot eyes, and the circles from yesterday were even darker. "It was an interesting night last night." She put the car into reverse and backed out of the driveway. There was another fire, but thankfully Dr. Hayworth was awake. He managed to call the fire department and get out before the fire reached his bedroom. "Did he see anything?" Bubba asked. "No, it was after midnight and dark. He said he would normally have been asleep, but a case was bothering him. We processed what we could last night, but it's hard to find evidence in the dark. So we're headed back out there this morning." "Sounds good," Bubba said, but his eyes were on a woman across the street. It was the same woman from the coffee shop the other day. "Makenna, do you know her?" he asked, pointing at the woman. Makenna followed his finger and nodded. "Yeah, that's Rachel Haynes. She's a bit of an odd duck, but harmless. Keeps to herself mostly. Why?" Rachel Haynes. Why did that name seem familiar to him? He could feel it, how he knew her, circling in his brain, but he couldn't place her yet. "I saw her at the coffee shop too, and she looked angry at the sight of me. Now she's here, near my parents' house? It just seems odd." Makenna's eyes were back on the road. "She wanders the city a lot, but that is a little odd. We'll look into it when we get done this morning." Bubba nodded and tried to dislodge the unease from his stomach. Could she be important? Was he missing something by not remembering who she was? 15 minutes later, they pulled up to the charred house. Another police cruiser sat in the street, and yellow crime scene tape surrounded the area. "Stay close to me so you don't accidentally contaminate the scene," Makenna said as she parked the car. Bubba fell into step beside her, but as he approached the charred house, visions of his own narrow escape filled his mind. He could hear the crackling flames and feel the heat seeping in through his bedroom door. He shook his head to clear the past and focused on the house in front of him. Though Makenna had said the fire department arrived quickly, most of the house was still blackened and charred. The far end, which must have housed the bedroom the doctor escaped from, was still intact, though Bubba knew smoke damage would have ruined the interior of it as well. "Captain, I think you're going to want to see this," Tad called from the left. Bubba followed Makenna to where Tad and Kelsey stood staring down at the ground, a yellow evidence flag stuck up out of the ground marking something. "Is that a shoe print?" Makenna asked. "It is. It's not clear because it looks like maybe the person slipped. But that's not the weird part." Bubba stared down at the footprint, trying to discern what Tad was talking about. But he didn't see anything out of the ordinary. It looked just like "Is that a woman's shoe print?" Makenna asked. And then Bubba realized. The print did look too thin and too short to belong to a man, which meant that if this print did belong to the arsonist, they were looking not for a man, but for a woman. "It sure looks that way to me, Captain." "Well, this changes everything," Makenna said. "There's more," Kelsey said and pointed to another flag sticking up a few feet away. "We found a rock with blood on it." "Is it enough to process?" Makenna asked. "I don't know, but we'll sure try. Regardless, if these belong to the arsonist, she'll probably have a cut somewhere on her. Judging by the distance, I'd say her hand or arm, maybe even her face if she's shorter." A woman. She had definitely not been expecting that. Female serial killers were rare. Female arsonists, even rarer. "We need to go back and look at the victims again, and Dr. Hayworth. I want everything on him you can find." "What are you thinking?" Bubba asked as he followed her back to the car. She stopped and faced him. "Statistically speaking, very few women kill, but those who do generally fall into two categories: killing for lust or visionaries. Since we have both male and female victims, that makes killing for lust less likely, which means we are probably looking for a visionary." "What's a visionary?" Bubba asked. "Someone who kills because they think someone told them to, or because they see it as getting rid of the scourge of society. Generally, visionaries have had a psychotic break, which makes them harder to catch because they lead a normal life the rest of the time. If our killer is a visionary, she could be anyone." "What would cause a psychotic break?" "Abuse generally, especially in childhood. Breaks generally form early in life, but lay dormant until something triggers them, like a death or a breakup? Bubba asked, interrupting her. Maybe. She narrowed her eyes at him. Something was clearly on his mind. Why? What are you thinking? It's probably nothing. His words held a note of dismissal, but the nervous tell of his hand rubbing across his chin told her it might be something. Felicity came over for dinner the other night, and she just seemed... He paused, as if searching for the right word. Agitated. Plus, remember my mother said she broke up with her boyfriend shortly before the first recent murder? She said they'd been together for years. Okay, but that's not much to go on, Makenna said, wondering where this accusal was coming from. Having been falsely accused himself, she couldn't imagine Bubba doing the same, unless there was more he wasn't telling her. People break up all the time, and maybe she was agitated about the breakup. Maybe, but remember how she didn't come over the night I returned? She also left in a rush the night she came for dinner, saying she had something she had to attend to. She's a receptionist. What work could she have had at 10 o'clock at night? What night was that? Makenna asked. The night the insurance guy was killed. Okay, that's a bit of a coincidence. But the fire didn't start until after midnight, so why would she have to rush out? Makenna had her reservations about Felicity. She had found it odd that his sister hadn't come to see him the first night. She was not about to accuse someone else in Bubba's family unless the proof was there. So far, there were just some odd coincidences and a general feeling of unease. Bubba shrugged and shook his head. His hand ran across his chin again. I don't know. To prepare? Plan it out? Maybe these visions come on suddenly, and once she gets one, she has to plan her attack right then. It's possible. Makenna chose her words carefully. She didn't want him to think she was dismissing his concern. However, that's a huge accusation to place on your sister. Bubba sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I know, but she also had a rough childhood, and sometimes when she looks at me, it just feels wrong. I hate saying that about her, especially since she's family, but if the killer could be anyone, don't you think we should at least consider the possibility? Makenna stared at him. Did he really think his foster sister could be capable of arson and murder? She couldn't quite read the emotion on his face, but she thought it appeared to be a sad determination. You're right. We'll look into her, but I want to look into the victims first. And I want to go back over the women. Maybe there was something other than you that tied them all together that we missed. She desperately hoped there was something they had missed. Swallowing that would be a lot easier than throwing his family into disarray again. Half an hour later, they sat at a table with Officer Cook, who had pulled everything he could find on Dr. Hayworth. You might be right, Captain. Dr. Hayworth has some interesting discrepancies between what he charged clients and what he billed to insurance companies. If the companies don't know already, they'll probably be opening an investigation into him soon. Wasn't the insurance guy doing a similar thing? Bubba asked. Makenna nodded as she thought back over the scene. Yeah, he was intercepting checks and telling clients they were denied. Is there any evidence of Peter overcharging clients? We know his ex-girlfriend Skye said he cheated on her, and his mother said he was asking for money. Nothing yet, but we're still looking. However, it was his shop. He could have charged people extra and few would realize it. Okay, and how about the women? Officer Cook shook his head. I'm not finding anything with money issues or relationship issues with the women. Is it possible we're looking at a copycat? Copycat murders happened, but Makenna had a hard time believing they would happen in this small town. They were already dealing with an insanely rare situation. I won't discount that possibility, but I think it's much more likely that our woman is a visionary who is getting dreams or messages to kill certain people. She turned to Bubba. I still think you're the link for the first round, and if so, we could be looking for someone who was interested in you. Maybe someone you turned down or possibly you didn't even know was interested? Bubba cocked an eyebrow at her. No offense, but that makes it a pretty impossible list. I can give you the names of the few women I dated, even the ones who I thought were interested that I turned down, but if I didn't know they liked me then, I certainly won't have any idea now. That is true. We'll start with what we do know and work backwards from there. We better get some coffee then, Bubba said with a smile. I have a feeling this might be a long day.